Warning. This episode contains frank discussions of race and racism that some may find challenging to listen to. Listener discretion is advised. But it also contains stories of overcoming challenges that some may find to be inspiring. Enjoy.
Coming up on this episode of Race, Health, and Happiness, novelist and ghostwriter Kern Carter talks about how Black writers are underpaid and why in this age of equity, diversity, and inclusion, it's still difficult to sell stories that focus on Black characters.
Publishers are set up to make money, and in their mind, their biggest audience is white women, right? So if a book diverts away from that audience, they feel like, I don't know, that's a risk for me to take. They would say to even put a Black person on the cover of a book would diminish how much the book would sell. That's where we're at with publishing.
The Race, Health, and Happiness podcast is hosted by Dr. Onye, certified public health physician specialist and family doctor. The views expressed by Dr. O's guests are their own and do not necessarily represent her opinions or those of the podcast. And now, here's Dr. O.
Hi, my name is Dr. O, and welcome to my podcast, Race, Health, and Happiness. We live in a world where Black, Indigenous, and people of color are more and more aware of the blatant and subtle ways that systemic racism impacts our lives. And as a doctor, I'm interested in how that affects people's health. But this podcast is about how to stay healthy and happy despite all that noise. My guest today is Kern Carter, a Canadian millennial author and guest blogger for numerous online publications that include LinkedIn, Elite Daily, Fatherly, and Huffington Post. He's the author of the novella Thoughts of a Fractured Soul and the novel Beauty Scars. He is also a ghostwriter, public speaker, and advocate for educational innovation. Kern, welcome to Race, Health, and Happiness.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you. And, I just gave your bio the way, I created this like mosaic from what I had learned about you online. But did I miss anything? Did I cover it all? Or is there anything you want to add about who you are? Let our listeners know.
I think you got a good amount of it. I'm really happy with that bio. I mean, the only thing maybe I'll throw in there is that I do have an online magazine called Cry, where we basically try to inspire and educate emerging writers and creatives, speaking about like the emotional part of being a creative. So that's the only thing I'll throw in there, but you guys did a good job.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask about one little thing that I couldn't formally put in the bio, or people would say I was biased. But from what I understand, you have like a Trini background. I'm 50%. I am 50%
Yes.
Trini, right?
Yes. I was born in Trinidad. Yeah.
Okay, so you were born in Trinidad. So I wasn't. Full disclosure, I was born in Montreal. But so I guess I'm not as Trini as I claim.
You are in the family. Come on, we're taking you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So yeah. Let's actually start with that, and then we'll talk about your career. Let's just take a moment to dance in that Trininess for a second. So you were born and raised in Trinidad, and then immigrated to Canada, but you grew up in Canada. So
I was born in Trinidad, so I came here when I was about 5 years old. I was born in Port of Spain. My mom came up here like a couple years before us, so I was actually raised by my grandmother and my aunt and my grandfather in Trinidad, and then we came up here when I was 5-6 years old, me and my two brothers. But I was raised in Toronto. I've been here since I was, like I said, 5-6 years old.
So you were really young when you went through what a lot of our members of our communities have been through, which is like the immigration, process. And so what, like a common thing is kind of often coming from like a higher socioeconomic background and then coming into Canada where it's more challenging. and also what you described, like your mom coming ahead or parents coming ahead and like building that background, which I guess for you had a really nice outcome, but can be traumatic to families, like what happens with that division. So it's awesome that you had your grandparents, but was that the case? I think that kind of was the case for you, right? It was like coming from some degree of privilege back home or private school, I think, and then and then moving to Toronto. Tell me about that.
That was interesting because I was so young I wouldn't have even recognized the privilege. Like my grandfather built our house. Our house was huge, so we had an upstairs part where I lived with my brothers, and then my grandparents stayed up there. But then the bottom part had my aunts, my cousins. Like we had I can't even call it a backyard. We just had space in the back with a bunch of land and stuff like that. And I did. My mom did send us to private school growing up. We were raised by a village, so that was the best part of growing up. I had my aunts would walk me to school. My grandmother was home when we got home to make sure that we were taken care of at home. My grandfather taught me things about being a man. It was really like a whole entire village that raised us while my mom was up here trying to get herself straight to come and get us and bring us to Canada. So it was definitely an interesting situation. Okay. So when we came to Toronto, even though we were just not in the best situation, like we all slept on the same bed when we came to Toronto, which was interesting.
This is so interesting because I spent, I guess, my formative years, like, age 0 to 6 in a kind of lower income neighborhood in Montreal. And when I was a kid, I didn't know that we were like, quote unquote, poor. When we lived in that neighborhood, like, yes, we had roaches, but I mean, when everybody has roaches, you don't know, like as a kid, you don't know the difference, right? So yeah, okay. So everybody had roaches, but there was this sense of community. I could run across to a neighbor's house. It was very multicultural. Like you can, you know what I mean? There was that sense, and people sometimes don't understand. They think of these situations as just all negative, but it's that sense of community. But I also think about, in the context of race, health, and happiness, there's a happiness there in the sense of what you just described, community. And I think sometimes as we move along, like I only experienced racism when I moved into like the suburban, white neighborhood when I was 6 years old. And that's when I realized, I was Black and experienced racism. But there's some things that we lose that I do wonder if there's a possibility of still moving up, as far as socioeconomic status and education and all of that dream, but still having respect for and keeping that sense of community of what you just described, like where the children are, taken care of, can move around, because we enter places and spaces later on where we are the only, and not having that in some form, I think can be harmful. But yeah, so that's cool. So you had a positive experience in that community and in growing up in general.
Definitely. I would say my experience growing up was overwhelmingly positive. Like we had an incredible upbringing. I wouldn't have changed it for anything, even though it was quote unquote community housing. We had an amazing childhood. Like we had a community center at the bottom of our building that from 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock, you could go in there and do your homework, get fed. We had a basketball court on the floor below that. We had parties during the summertime. They had full leagues. So we had football, baseball, basketball league. Also, the cost of things were different then. So we went to summer school for the entire summer, full day for $5 for just like a program fee. Like, yeah, okay. Like it was incredible. So I mean, it was just to kind of compare it, when my daughter became around that age, for her to go for 2 weeks was $200. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was just the difference that made a huge difference in the way that we're able to kind of socialize her, right?
Pause. So many of us from marginalized communities know the benefits of social programs through our own lived experience. But I think the greatest impact is felt when these types of programs are taken away. In fact, one of the many contributing factors to the gross overrepresentation of Black Canadians in prison is thought to be the slashing of funding for inner city youth programs in the 1990s. Researchers at the University of Toronto have reported that from the year 2005 to 2016, the rate of federal incarceration of Black Canadians exploded by 70%, resulting in Black representation in federal prisons that is 3 times what Blacks represent in the general Canadian population. So then tell us, how did writing come into your life? Because you said that your mom came here, because a lot of us, our parents came here and had the struggle. And so, sometimes I talk with guests about like the immigrant dream is like, okay, you have to become a doctor or a lawyer, an engineer. And sometimes the arts are not as celebrated, but certainly you are a writer. So what was that journey like for you? Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer, or did it come about, later on?
Oh, I always knew. I wrote my first book in when I was 8 years old, so third grade.
Okay.
So I knew from jump that this is going to be my career. I was a basketball player though, so I was really, really good at basketball. So for a very long time and throughout high school, because I was so good, I got offered a scholarship to go to university. So basketball actually took me further, but I was writing the whole time. So people didn't actually know I was writing until I got to university. You know what I mean? So it was this kind of hidden secret that I enjoyed writing. But then I got hurt. And when I got hurt with basketball, then I was like, I know exactly what I want to do. I'm going to start focusing on the writing. And I mean, I started writing my first book, and then I figured out how to make money as a copywriter and content writer and stuff like that, and ghostwriting and things of that nature. And then that really what kind of blew up and took me to where I am right now as a full-time writer.
Okay. So I come from like the world of science. And so when I interview people, I ask, like, what is your superpower? Because it isn't always clear for us in the sciences, like where our gifts lie, because things are very much more rigid. I feel like when I interview an artist like yourself, it's pretty clear what your superpower is. But let's talk about how you express that superpower of writing, because you have said a bunch of things that I do not know that much about. And maybe I'm not alone. Maybe I'm not the only person listening to you who doesn't know. So can you describe what it is to be like a copywriter, like you said, and ghostwriter? Because we know that maybe from hip hop, but if you get like Drake drama and whatever, but okay, a brief pause here for the amusing tale of Drake and the ghostwriters. So I know we have podcast listeners of diverse backgrounds, countries, different ages. So let me give you a bit of hip hop context. Unlike other types of music, hip hop artists are expected to write all their own material. In reality, this is actually not the case, and more of them have writers. But Drake did have some drama back in 2015 about this when some of his ghostwriters exposed him. And he did finally respond, and I quote, he said, "Music can be a collaborative process." Personally, I agree. We love Drake. No shade, but the ghostwriter drama was funny.
Yeah, so to be a writer, full-time writing, you, at least for now, it's going to be difficult to just sell books. Yes, I am an author and I have 2 books, but that's going to be difficult. So to make money, you do copywriting and you do ghostwriting. Copywriting is essentially everything you see on the internet. So if you see someone's webpage, if you see a marketing ad, if you see even an advertisement, even in print, so even if it's in a newspaper or in a magazine or something like that, anything that is speaking to a customer written is copywriting. It's a message to try to communicate something so the audience could purchase something or interact with something, right? That's copywriting. Ghostwriting is somebody who has a book that they want to write. They have a story that they want to tell, but they themselves are not a writer. They don't know how to actually put those words together, but they have an incredible story. So they will hire someone like me to basically write that story for them. I won't get any credit.
Yeah, I was like, because people do that sometimes. They say, can you write this book? And then there's an author there. But ghost means something else is happening. Yeah. So
No, this is not, I will get 0 credit for it. So I just get paid up front. Okay. But because I don't get any credit, I get to charge a lot of money. So that really is what kind of sustains me. But there's a lot more things happening, ghostwriting happening that you would think. Every celebrity that you see on that writes an article in the New York Times or puts something on Medium, they're not writing it themselves. They hire people like me. I've written for these people, so I could say it. I'm on an NDA, so I can't tell you who, but I've written for people who you've read their thing and been like, that was such a great article. I'm like, I wrote that.
Oh, no. So like it's
Yeah.
like that though. So nobody's really writing. Well, not nobody, but there's quite a few people
Very
who we
few,
think are
very few are writing their own things.
okay. That is interesting. So it's like this underground system and like,
Yeah.
but then how do they know who ghostwriters are? Like, how do you, what is that, hiding in plain sight kind of thing?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's a lot of networking. There are actually ghostwriting companies that have like groups of ghostwriters that they connect with. So you could go to a ghostwriting company and they'll be like, yeah, here's a project and we specifically want a black female to write this book because that's the perspective that I'm coming from. So they'll like that's how it goes. They get very specific about the perspective because they want to make sure that it's as close to their voice as possible. But yeah, I worked with one team. I used to work for a team called Writer's Block, who was run by Pollyanna Reed, and we wrote some stuff for people that you would not believe.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, like people that you could think of in your mind, that's the most famous we've written for. So it's incredible.
Well, if you don't know, now you know.
Now you know.
Yes. So to those who are aspiring, maybe that's a cool spot. And to those who are struggling to write, not for your papers, not for
Not for papers.
assignments.
Don't do that.
No,
Don't
but
do
if
that.
you are established and thinking about it, it looks like it's a common practice. Okay, so that's cool. So that pays the bills, but your artistic home is in writing fiction novels. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. That's where my heart is. That's what I love doing the most. I'll do it for as long as I'll do it for free, although I don't want to. And I do. I mean, I sell books. I've self-published 2 books, and I've sold thousands of copies. So I'm fortunate. Most authors don't sell hundreds of copies or even dozens of copies. So I mean, I've been really fortunate. But yeah, that's. I mean, if you ask me to close my eyes and imagine what I want to do with the rest of my life, I'll tell you write books.
Okay. And do you want to tell the audience a little bit about Thoughts of a Fractured Soul and Beauty Scars, just to kind of give a sense of the type of books that you write?
Yeah, for sure. So Thoughts of a Fractured Soul was the first book that I wrote, and it's a novella, which is a shorter novel. And it was, I took the essence of my life. So I took the fact that I was a teenage father and I immigrated, like I took the essence of that, but then I told like this fictional tale about this individual, this young man who was just totally just kept making the wrong decisions all the time. So I imagined my life, because I was a young person, I was writing it. I imagined what my life would be like if I just failed and I was just stagnant. And if like, like I had all this ambition and stuff like that, but nothing went my way. And I called it Thoughts of a Fractured Soul because I wrote it in actually a reflective voice. So I wrote it as little pieces of thought bubbles. So some thoughts are like 2 pages, some thoughts are a paragraph, some thoughts are less than that. And I kind of like intertwine poetry into that or poetic form into that. So it's really just this expression of my life fictionalized up until that moment. And then Beauty Scars was completely different. Beauty Scars, I just said, forget about that. I'm going to write completely from my imagination. And I told a story about this young girl who gets into a car accident at the beginning of the story, and instead of becoming scarred for life, she actually becomes more beautiful. So I tell a story of someone who never asked for beauty but found its power, like the power of what beauty is, and how that impacted her life. And then when that beauty gets threatened to be taken away, how she fights for that, and how she reacts to that. But now that she loves that beauty and has lived in its power and lived in everything that she's gotten from it. So that's a totally different story. It's a little bit fantastical, but it's what I love to do, and I'm working on a couple other books right now. So I'm hoping to share those with the world soon.
Oh wow, okay. Are you allowed to tell us anything about the books that are coming up?
Yeah, sure. I have the book that I hope my agent will be okay with this. I think the book is called Boys and Girls Screaming. And it's a young adult book that I'm working on, and the basic premise of it is that this young girl named Ever, she loses her father, so she suffers trauma. She loses her father, and then her mother has a stroke. So to help her grieve, she forms this group called Boys and Girls Screaming, and she brings all her friends together into her basement, and they kind of gather and they kind of talk through their problems. But instead of Ever actually becoming fulfilled by this, she actually dives deeper into depression. So it actually makes her worse, and then we figure out that there's a bigger secret to her life that she's been holding on to. So that's essentially what that book is about. But yeah, we're going through the process with my agent right now to try to get it traditionally published. So we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Okay. What have been some of the challenges and successes? But let's start with the challenges first in trying to publish in the traditional book publishing manner.
Yeah, it's traditionally, like, just so people understand how, so they get a framework for what I'm trying to talk about is when you're trying to sell your book traditionally or get it published traditionally, you're trying to get a publisher to buy your manuscript. So they're going to pay you money to be like, here, take this. We love your manuscript. Take this. Publishers are set up to make money, and in their mind, their biggest audience is a white woman. That's literally how. Yeah, there's a study on this. So this is not. I'm not making these things up. There are studies on this. That's their biggest audience. That's who, in their mind, they're like, we are speaking to this white woman, right? So if a book diverts away from that audience and publishers are in the business of making money, they feel like, I don't know, that's a risk for me to take. That's literally how they're thinking. So me coming in as a Black author, telling stories, and even though my stories traditionally they're not based in race. Like my story, like I'm just telling stories that the characters are Black, but the stories are not about race. But even so, even with that kind of perspective, it's still complicated because they're looking at it like, who is going to enjoy this book? Who is going to read this book? Ignoring the fact that there are millions of Black readers that would love this book, and ignoring the fact there are millions of Asian readers over here that would love this book, and millions of they're ignoring that, completely
readers,
ignoring
right?
that.
People want to hear those stories, right?
I want to hear those stories too.
So what is it? Because this has happened in the film industry, I know, at least in the United States. Like, I'm not well read on this topic, but where we're talking about systems of discrimination, where people had wanted to tell movies or have big budget movies on, like, Black lives, and they would be told, oh no, but that has been debunked, right? Like, we know that white audiences, as you said, Asian audiences, broad audiences will go and watch a movie about a Black person or an Asian person. Like, we're at the point where we've hopefully put that to rest, but you're saying that's still going on in the publishing industry. Is it throughout North America, or you would say Canada specifically? Like, what is that about?
Nah, that's North America, UK. The study was actually a UK study. This is still deep into the. I mean, publishing is so old. Publishing is a very, very old industry. It's hundreds of years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not it's like the movie industry is just like in the 19th century, right? 20th century, essentially, right? Publishing is so enshrined, so it's a little bit more tricky to get out of it. But no, it's I would say over the last, since this kind of this new energized racial movement, now the publishing industry has taken steps. So there are publishers who are hiring Black leaders now. So now the Black the name for the person who runs a publishing company is called a publisher. So they'll hire Black publishers now. There's some publishing companies who rejig their executive boards to make sure, that there are Black people in those boards. Black agents, that's another problem, because agents are the gatekeepers to get to publishers. So they're trying to find ways for more Black agents to get involved. So they're taking steps now, like super recently, to make sure that these things are happening. But historically, and what's happened over the last even decade, it's been very difficult to get in. I'll give you an example, because this just happened recently, but there was a hashtag started by an author, and I don't remember her name. It's something McKinney, but she started a hashtag called Publishing Paid Me. And what she did was invite people on this hashtag over Twitter to publicize how much you got on your advance. Like, for that payment for your manuscript.
Okay, the payment the publisher gives you for writing the book. Okay. Mm-hmm.
For writing the book. She said, everybody tell me what you got on your advance, right? When people started putting the advance, there would be Black authors who had published 2 and 3 books, fairly popular authors who published 2 and 3 books, that are still just getting $20,000 and $30,000 on their advance, maybe $50,000. Very few into the 6 figures. Very, very, very few. When the white authors put their advances up, $800,000, $500,000, $400,000, $250,000, $2 million for unproven debut authors. Like, the discrepancy was so wide that it was like alarming. So to say that the problem is gone or the problem has been worked on is false. Now they're working on it. Now they're doing things to change that. But it's a huge issue, and that's because of the reasons I told you about. Like, they see this ideal, in their mind, is still ideal reader, without recognizing that there are tons of the readership is far more broad than you could ever imagine, and we shouldn't be like. There's a problem to even they would say to even put a Black person on the cover of a book would diminish how much the book would sell. Like, that's where we're at. That's where we're at with publishing.
Pause. In case you were wondering, the racial disparity in payment that Kern describes is not just a problem in the publishing industry. It's actually pervasive throughout Canada. So for instance, in Canada, compared to a white woman, a black woman is 1.5 times more likely to work in a job where she is overqualified. And let's talk about healthcare. Statistics Canada has reported that Black and Filipino healthcare workers earn significantly less than their white co-workers. In Ontario, a racialized doctor earns 88 cents for every dollar that a white doctor earns. Now, I'm not knocking education. Education is important, but my point is it's not the great equalizer that people claim. Ultimately, our systems and policies need to change in order to achieve true equality. Can I get an amen? Thank you.
So I love writing. I love the industry, but it's flawed. It's something that we need to change.
No, there is no question. There is no question. And so, what were those conversations like, especially when you were just first starting, to get a platform or to get opportunities? Because so you put forth a manuscript, and they're just like, is it mainly just rejections initially, and somebody bothers to have a conversation, or what does that journey?
No. I'll definitely. I don't mind explaining it all. I love talking about it. I self-published those first two books, so I just put those books out myself. I didn't get a traditional publishing deal. No one paid me for those books. And I did it purposely because I wanted to build my own platform. I knew going in of the problem. So I knew that this is going to be difficult. So I really wanted to build my own platform. And honestly, too, I want to get better at writing. Like, novel writing is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very technical thing to do that people might not realize. You need a lot of technical skills to actually write a novel that sounds fluid and beautiful. So I wanted to get better as a writer. The challenges came, like, once I wrote those two books and I was like, okay, like, I feel really confident in my writing and my abilities. It came with the recent books and trying to get those traditionally published, because I feel like, well, now there's no excuse. Like, I'll put in the work myself. I have a platform. I have a blog with thousands of followers. I'm out here now. Let's go. Here's a story. So if I propose a story to you and I think it's great, and you know, I found an agent who believes in me, because the agent is a gatekeeper that could send it to a publisher, because just so the audience knows, like, I personally cannot send a book to a publisher myself.
Okay, you need an
agent has to send.
Okay.
You need an agent to go to the big publishers anyway. You need an agent. So the agent sent it to them now, and it's to go through that process of them not really understanding how that book fits into their portfolio. You know what I'm saying? Is a struggle to try to explain why I don't, like, a feedback would be like, I don't include trauma, they don't say black trauma, they say enough trauma into it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, no, this is not it. Like, I'm not selling trauma. Like, yes, it's there. There are great books on trauma. Thank you. So that's a huge issue. Like, if it's not something wrapped up in, I was, you know, born in, like, the hood, and I went to jail, and I came back out, and I overcame that. It's like they don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? So
like, they're looking for stereotypical stories.
Yeah, and now they're trying to change. But even like, okay, I'll give an example. I was in I love educating myself, so I'm always trying to get better as a writer, as I said. So I actually took novel writing courses over the last year, and in one of my novel writing courses, it's about there's a part in the book and in my manuscript that I'm pitching that dealt with a young girl who's on assistance, and I had to. So my class was mostly white women, and they just couldn't understand the concept of someone being on assistance but still having a car, or being on assistance and still being able to do things. Like, their concept of assistance is not how assistance is. So I have to actually spend pretty much the entire class explaining what that meant, and they wanted me to actually change it in my manuscript, and I had to tell them that the audience that I'm writing to would understand that without me explaining. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Like, I don't need to explain that into my manuscript, because then that means I'm talking to that white woman, and I'm not talking to that white woman.
Yes. Because you're centering the margins. You are speaking to people who understand it.
Thank you.
But still welcoming others to understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I certainly heard this before. And even, with our own podcast, I kind of say it's the 201 course. I'm not going to get into explaining what racism is, because I'm assuming people have that lived experience or would do the homework and are interested in the lives of people who are walking that path. But we're not going to explain it in that sense, because then you miss out on something. It detracts from the story, right? So
100%.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
And so what you're describing, I mean, that's the definition of being marginalized. It's like if your story is not the mainstream one, then it becomes questioned, it becomes dissected, it needs to be changed. Sometimes for us in these spaces, we need to change ourselves to fit a mold, right? And so they're telling you to change your story to fit a mold. Sometimes we're in places and spaces in the classroom or at work where we have to engage in this inauthenticity, right? You can't be the authentic self, and you can't write authentically. And so, part of what we are always trying to do is find how we can manage this and be our authentic selves, and express, our gifts, our superpowers in ways that are authentic. So I would ask then, with these challenges, what are the different ways that you have been able to thrive despite these systems that want you to come with, change your authenticity, change yourself, change the voices, change the narrative? What are ways, you already mentioned one, which was by publishing on your own, or I guess non-traditional publishing, but maybe we can just kind of explore some of those ways that you've managed to resist that, that perspective.
It's actually kind of difficult. I'm not even gonna lie. The approach that I've taken was just what I explained. I just said, I'm gonna have to build my own platform. I'm hesitant to answer. It's because it goes back to the situation of having to work double as hard to get something.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It feels really frustrating to say that, and I don't want to give the impression that. Also, from the other perspective too, though, I don't want to give the impression that every writer doesn't have to struggle in some way. Every writer is going to have their own struggles, and getting heard as an artist or a writer, period, is difficult.
Yes.
So I don't want to lessen any other writer's experience.
No, but this is an extra layer of having barriers and not getting paid as much, right? That has to do with the random color of your skin. So and your lived experience. So that is real.
It puts pressure on you as a writer to think about, maybe I should change that. I think about those things sometimes. Maybe I should
conform,
change that up a little bit, conform a little bit. Maybe I need to do that, because if this is not going to work for me, and I'm literally see the proof right here where all these authors are writing these stories for this audience that they're getting paid $500,000 advances, and these authors who are Black that I love are getting paid $20,000 and $30,000 advances. Then I want to be over here. Obviously, you obviously want to. You obviously want to make the $500,000, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
You do in your mind want to conform, but I would say some of the things that I've just tried to do besides building my own platform is just really trying to find people within the industry who really do understand and support. Because there are some people who do understand and support. I have an agent now who is 1,000% on my side. Understands my books, understands my story, understands my perspective,
and who doesn't necessarily look like you, I'm presuming.
Doesn't look like me. He's a white male, a white man who does not look like me at all, and understands everything. Because I actually had an agent before him, and who I lost. We ended up parting ways, and we just never. She just didn't get the perspective. She didn't understand where I was coming from. We had to change. I changed my book 2 and 3 times for her. I conformed.
Mm-hmm.
I conformed. I wanted it so bad, Dr. O, that I conformed. You know what I'm saying? I was like, all right, I'm going to change this. And I even told her, I'm like, you realize this is a huge change, because this is not what the book is about. She's like, the big publishers, this is what they want. I only pitched because she was a big agent. I only pitched a big publisher, so let's go, Kern.
And you know what? I don't want to disrespect conforming in and of itself, because for those who have come before us, if you're thinking about your mom as a nurse or our ancestors and everything, sometimes conforming was has been a form of survival, of occupying space and
Yes.
getting opportunities. So I don't want to poo-poo that, but I also want to say, like, we're exploring other options that exist in 2020
Yes.
aside from conforming. But there have been times, and there are those who had to pay that price so that we are where we are. So,
Yes,
but
agreed. And thank you for saying that, because that's very true. Like, sometimes it was a life or death situation. Sometimes it's just a livelihood situation. So they definitely want to do that. And my mom did what she had to do for us to be here. So I'm definitely not trying to say anything negative about that. I'm just, my experience right now, where we are in the world right now, I feel like we've come a long way, and those sacrifices have been made to where I should have to do that.
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I should not have to do that. You should get my story by now. You should and if you don't understand it, there are people out there who will understand it.
Yes.
So it's just really frustrating to not have the same freedom of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? To explore topics that might not be 100% in line with what you think will sell, or 100% in line with what traditionally has sold, but what I know to be true, and not just myself, but other authors know to be true, that there's an audience for it. Just give it to them. And we can't, it's hard to talk about one aspect of the publishing industry without talking about all of them, because that also leads to marketing. Like, who are you marketing to?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're only going to market to through these same channels and to the same audience, of course, then the audience that I'm speaking to is not going to get it. We need to go into those spaces and find those readers and draw them to this book. Are you speaking in their language? You're not even marketing on the right platforms. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's a whole kind of system that you need to plug every single part of it. Or I don't even want to say dismantle. I don't know
disrupt,
what kind of
disrupt
people,
and change.
disrupt,
right? It needs to be,
yes.
shaken up and those barriers taken down, I think. And I think so. I mean, you've spoken about kind of creating your own path, or what we call like self-determination, saying you're not, going to do that. You found mentors, and it looks like some people find mentors who look like them, but oftentimes, particularly in Canada, we find mentors and allies or people who are in solidarity who do not look like us, but have this, social capital and ability to help us navigate those spaces. Is there anything else that you found other ways? So you have your novel, but then you found other sources of income, right?
Yeah.
Anything else that if there's an aspiring writer out there?
Just keep chugging and try to create your own platform, because the more desirable you are as an individual and as a brand, if you want to say that, the harder it is for somebody to deny you. You know what I mean? Like, once I got my first agent because she found out I sold 5,000 copies of books. So she's like, oh, anyone that could sell that many books independently must be worth something.
You're that 5,000 independently. Congrats,
Yeah.
Congrats. Let's pause for a second
Thank
and
you.
Celebrate you.
Thank you. But yeah, that's what I could tell you. Just try your best to really kind of build yourself up on your own and make those inroads. Like, you have to really know where you want to go, see who those people are that you need to connect with, and don't get too locked into if someone does or does not look like you, because once you get into those spaces, very few people are going to look like you. So that's just how it is right now. So until that changes, then you have to reach out to those people who may not look like you but support you, because there are supporters, there are advocates, and there are people who understand. So
Okay.
I'd say find those people.
Yes, find those people. And the other piece that I got from what you said is also having a vision for yourself, right? So you have a sense of where you want to go and the path that you are creating. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think, the piece that you said about there's some things that we do in different ways because we have to, like working twice as hard. I would say sometimes it's 10 times as hard. And given the disparity gap in finances that you just described, it probably is of that magnitude. And sometimes conforming. But, there's pretty good evidence that, internalizing and not being able to be your authentic self does take a toll health-wise. So there's a price that is paid that people aren't always aware of when we decide to conform, or where we continue to support systems that create a situation where we're working 10 times as hard. And so by you, leading the way, by people hearing this about how systems can be disrupted and how you can kind of have that self-determination to say, this is where I'm going to head, this is my vision, I'm going to look for allies, and we're going to, you know what I mean? I'm going to find my way, then inspires others. And so that I would say brings health, that brings wellness, that brings examples that other people can follow. So I want to congratulate you and thank you for the work that you're doing and the voices that you are bringing into the world of literature.
You. Thank you. I really, really do appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's important and people need to hear it. And in that light, I always ask my guests about what brings them joy, right? Because with all of this hard work, you have to find ways that bring you joy and refill your cup. And so maybe people can learn from that as well. So, Kern, what brings you joy?
I would say two things bring me joy for sure. My daughter. So any moment that I could spend with her and to see her, she's 18 now, so to see her start her own journey and find her own passions and kind of start living her own life, that's like the most amazing feeling in the world. If you don't have kids though, and maybe like as a career kind of thing, I find it's important, as much as I love writing, I think it's important that I do things that I enjoy that are not writing. I like listening to music. I like watching stuff on Netflix. I like going outside just to be outside. I like being around my friends. Like doing things that have nothing to do with writing is important. But also too, what I've found that brings me joy, because you're asking me about joy, what brings me joy is actually writing. So I'll be lying if I said anything else brings me as much joy. But writing without making it public. So just writing for myself. Like having things that I have, I just write and there's no pressure. I don't care if it's grammatically incorrect. I'm just writing for myself to make sure that it's like reminding myself that I still love it. Because once you get caught up into this game of validation, because to be honest, as an artist, that's what it's about. It's about like getting other people to love you and love your work. Like they have to love your work for you to make any money. That's just life as an artist, right? So you're constantly giving a piece of yourself and you get rejected regularly. The rejection is a regular part of being an artist. So unless you're refilling that cup and reminding yourself of the joy that you had when I was 8 years old writing that book, you could get discouraged really quickly, and then you become a little bit cynical, and you could start losing that love and passion that you have for your art. So I just write for myself sometimes for no reason. No one else is ever going to see it. And when I do that, it reminds me why I love doing this. So I would encourage any writer to make sure you're writing something for yourself that no one is ever going to see.
That is fantastic. And I love your intentionality about it. Like, you know that, yes, you enjoy writing as your field and what you said, like, you know, getting that validation, but then you do it as the pure sense of the art that you love and to maintain that love. And I think that is phenomenal. And I think that's something that even beyond artists, we can all reflect on, right? There's the work that we do to, put food on the table, and then thinking about and being intentional about the things that we do that are just for us. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for being on Race, Health, and Happiness.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me.
The Race, Health, and Happiness podcast was created by Dr.Onye, and she's our host. The show is produced, edited, and engineered by yours truly, Dr. Carl Cabasel. Our technical producer is Obadiah George. Awit Siam is our research and resource manager, and Sindhu Senthil Mohan is our medical research consultant. Promotions coordinator is Jordan Gibson, and social media coordinator is Latoya Powell. Javiera Gutierrez Duran is our logistics coordinator, and JL Joseph is our production intern. The RHH theme song, it's composed and performed by Gold Keys, and graphic design for the podcast is handled by Veronica Ng. We'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at RaceHealth&Happy. And check out the show notes. Our website is RaceHealth&Happiness.com. Thank you for listening to Race, Health, and Happiness, and please subscribe to us anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. I'm Dr. Carl Cabasel, and we'll talk with you soon.